The hum of machinery, the chatter of alien tongues, and the distant whirring of hovercrafts filled the streets of the crumbling human districts on Earth. The sky above was a sickly shade of gray, the remnants of once vibrant cities now reduced to alien-controlled ghettos. The air was thick with the stench of pollution, and beneath it all, a palpable silence echoed the surrender of a civilization. Maya Chaitin stood on the balcony of a dilapidated building, overlooking the sprawling ruins of what was once a thriving metropolis. She had never seen the Earth she had heard about in her childhood stories, where humans ruled the stars, explored the unknown, and thrived in their unity. Instead, she had inherited a broken world, a world where humanity had been bent under the boot of the Voltrex Collective, the ruthless alliance of alien species that controlled most of the galaxy. Earth was now their prize, the last human bastion on the verge of collapse. Once, humans had been numerous. They had conquered space and brought peace to their home planet. But that was long before the Voltrex arrived. Now, the remnants of human society were scattered across the globe, divided into factions, some fighting for scraps of autonomy, others simply surviving under the yoke of alien oppression. Technology had been stripped away, the rich history and culture of humanity had been erased in favor of alien dominance. The Voltrex didn't just conquer planets, they obliterated the identities of the civilizations they overtook, stripping their people of everything that made them unique. The resistance had been weak. Sure, there had been skirmishes, attacks on alien outposts, sabotage, covert operations, but they were always futile. There was no grand strategy, no centralized effort. The various human factions were fractured, each with their own agendas and grudges. The Voltrex were too powerful, their technology too advanced, their numbers too great. Maya had led countless operations against the Voltrex, but they were always quashed, often with brutal consequences. She had seen her people's hope flicker out, one operation after another. But this time, something felt different. She wasn't alone in her thoughts. The room behind her was filled with the core members of the human resistance, their faces grim but determined. Maya's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle of the Voltrex's new plans. An intercepted communication had revealed a devastating truth: the Voltrex were preparing to expand their capital, turning Earth's last uncolonized continent into their new headquarters. This wasn't just an expansion, it was the final move to fully integrate Earth into their empire, to eradicate the last shred of human autonomy. "Do we strike now?" Commander Raid, Maya's second-in-command, asked from across the room, his voice laced with urgency. Maya turned back to face the group, her expression hard. "The time has come. If we don't act now, Earth will be lost forever. We won't get another chance." The rest of the room fell silent. The stakes had never been higher. If the Voltrex succeeded in consolidating their power on Earth, any hope of regaining control would be lost. Humans would become nothing more than servants, working the fields of a planet that had once been their cradle. This was their one shot at survival, at freedom, at the chance to reclaim their home. But there were risks. The Voltrex had not only superior military technology, they also had an intricate spy network, a ruthless intelligence apparatus that had infiltrated every corner of human society. If they knew about the Resistance's plans, they would crush them in an instant. Maya had no illusions about what was at stake. She had lost too many comrades already. But the thought of Earth, their Earth, becoming just another trophy in the Voltrex's empire was too much to bear. "Commander Raid," Maya said, her voice steady but filled with resolve, "mobilize the forces. We strike at dawn." The decision was made. The fate of Earth, and the future of humanity, hung in the balance. The operation would need to be swift, precise, and above all, surprising. The Voltrex had grown complacent, believing the humans were too fractured, too beaten down to organize an effective resistance. But that was their mistake. Maya had been gathering the disparate human factions for years, quietly uniting them under one banner. The time for disunity was over. They would rise as one, or they would fall as one. As she prepared to leave, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lila, a young woman who had joined the resistance only a few months earlier. She was bright-eyed, hopeful, still clinging to the notion that they could win. It reminded Maya of herself when she was younger, when she first joined the cause, full of idealism. But over time, that had been replaced with the harsh realities of war. Maya, Lila said, her voice trembling slightly, what if we fail? What if this is just another battle we lose? Maya's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. We will not fail, she said, her voice firm. But even if we do, we will show the Voltrex that we are not broken. We will make them realize that Earth, our Earth, will never be their trophy. The words hung in the air, a quiet promise. Maya turned and walked out of the room, her mind steeled for what was to come. The plan was set in motion. The resistance would strike hard and fast, hitting the Voltrex where it would hurt the most. They would cripple their infrastructure, disrupt their communications, and take the fight directly to their doorstep. As she walked through the darkened streets of the human district, Maya felt the weight of responsibility press down on her. Every step was a reminder of the countless lives lost in this battle, of the countless sacrifices made by people who had never known freedom. But this time, they would not be fighting for survival alone. This time, humanity would fight as one. She could feel the rumble of something deep within her, a spark that had been reignited by the simple decision to stand up. To say enough was enough. No empire had ever withstood the moment when humanity decided to fight back. Maya knew this was their moment. No matter the cost, the Voltrex would learn that the human spirit could not be crushed. Earth was theirs, and they would take it back. The streets around her were silent, but beneath that silence, a storm was gathering, one that would shake the Voltrex to their core. Maya's fingers clenched around the railing as she watched the procession below. Alien ships flitted through the sky, their sleek, obsidian forms gliding like predators over the desolate urban sprawl. They were the Voltrex's emissaries, here to mark the beginning of their final push, an expansion of their capital into Earth's last untouched territory. The announcement had come only days ago. The Voltrex were constructing a new command center on the continent once known as the Amazon Basin, an area untouched by alien forces for the last 50 years. It was to be the jewel in their imperial crown, a symbol of their absolute rule over the last bastion of human freedom. For Maya, it was the breaking point. A single announcement was all it took to shatter any hope of a peaceful coexistence. The Voltrex had been steadily tightening their grip on Earth, but this move was different. It wasn't just another occupation, it was a declaration. They weren't just conquering land anymore. They were snuffing out the last spark of resistance, sealing off the possibility of rebellion once and for all. The truth was, humanity had no chance against the Voltrex in direct combat. Their technological superiority was insurmountable. But there was something the Voltrex failed to understand about humans, their ability to adapt, to think in ways that transcended conventional warfare. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, their refusal to be caged or broken. Maya had seen it in the eyes of every person she had met in the resistance, an unyielding spark of defiance. She turned from the balcony, her face hardening. The time had come to change the tide. For years, she had worked alongside scattered cells, coordinating small-scale strikes and sabotage missions, but that had only delayed the inevitable. Now, the only option left was to go on the offensive. She called together her inner circle, the few who had managed to survive the endless betrayals and defeats. They were the last of a dying breed, humans who still had the fire to fight back. There was no longer any room for division. There were no more petty feuds. The time for compromises was over. Maya looked at the holographic map spread before her, pinpointing the Voltrex capital construction site. It was heavily guarded, and the infrastructure around it was formidable. But there were weak points. Small openings. The Voltrex were not infallible. They had a reputation for overwhelming firepower, but they were not immune to precision strikes. It was about hitting them where it hurt, where they weren't expecting it. The human factions had their differences, some wanted to focus on diplomacy, others on guerrilla tactics, but all of them shared one thing in common: they had been broken by the Voltrex. They had lost everything, from their land to their legacy. It wasn't just about reclaiming Earth anymore, it was about preserving humanity's right to exist, to determine its own future. Maya knew that to unite the human factions, she needed to give them something more than just a fight. She needed to give them a reason to believe. In the darkness of her underground base, a plan began to take shape. It wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to be clean. But it was their only option. Maya's team was small, but they had an edge that the Voltrex lacked: ingenuity. They would hijack the Voltrex communication networks, sow confusion among their ranks, and strike at their heart. But to do so, they needed allies. The different human factions had to come together. The infighting and mistrust that had plagued them for decades needed to be set aside, at least for a time. Maya began reaching out to leaders she had once considered enemies, offering them a common goal. At first, the responses were lukewarm, some were skeptical, others downright hostile. But Maya wasn't asking for blind allegiance, she was asking for survival. Then came the twist that changed everything. One of the resistance leaders, Gorath, a former military commander who had once fought against the Voltrex in a failed attempt at a coup, made an unexpected move. He reached out to Maya in private, offering a solution she had never anticipated. Gorath had been working on something far more dangerous than anyone had realized: an ancient human weapon, an AI-based strategy system lost to history and thought to be destroyed by the Voltrex years ago. This AI was no ordinary machine. It had the ability to learn, adapt, and predict movements with near-perfect accuracy. It was designed for war, and its power had the potential to shift the balance of the entire conflict. The weapon, known only as Project Reclamation, had been buried deep underground in a forgotten bunker for decades. Only Gorath knew where it was hidden, and he had kept its existence a secret for years, unsure of whether it could even be activated. But now, desperate times called for desperate measures. Gorath, for reasons only he understood, had decided that the time had come to unleash it. The implications were staggering. If Project Reclamation was real, it could turn the tide in humanity's favor. But there were risks. The AI had been designed for an age of human warfare, but the Voltrex had advanced far beyond what it had been intended for. The AI might not be able to adapt to the alien technology, or worse, it could turn on its creators. There were too many unknowns. Maya was cautious, but she also knew that time was running out. The Voltrex were too close to securing their final victory. The decision wasn't hers to make alone. She needed to consult with the other leaders, weigh the risks. As she sent word to the various factions, she couldn't shake the sense that this was the moment that would define humanity's future. For too long, they had been reactive, responding to the Voltrex's moves, trying to stay alive. But this time, they would take the initiative. This time, humanity would be the one setting the pace. The question was no longer if they could win, but if they were willing to risk everything for it. The meeting room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the flickering holographic projections that hovered above the table. Maya's face was set in a determined grimace as she addressed her team. They were an eclectic group, the remnants of a once thriving human resistance network. Their faces were a blend of youthful defiance and weathered experience: soldiers, hackers, scientists, and former diplomats, all united under a single banner, reclaiming their planet. "We've been running for too long," Maya began, her voice steady. "The Voltrex are too comfortable. They think they've already won. But this isn't about fighting another skirmish, or delaying their advance. This is about taking back what's ours. We have to hit them where it hurts the most: their arrogance." The holographic map of Earth flickered as it displayed the Voltrex's planned expansion, pinpointing key locations and facilities. Maya's fingers traced the map, and the team leaned in closer, their attention unwavering. "They think their capital will be the key to solidifying control," Maya continued, her tone sharp. "What they don't realize is that they've made a fatal mistake. The basin is sacred ground for humans, a place of ancient symbols, a relic of Earth's original strength. It's not just land to us. It's an icon. And the Voltrex don't understand the power of symbolism." Maya's eyes shifted to one of the team members, Kiran, a former military strategist with experience in guerrilla warfare. He was leaning forward, his brow furrowed in thought. Are you suggesting we turn the basin into a symbol of resistance? Kieran asked, his voice low but filled with an edge of curiosity. Exactly, Maya said. We hit them in the heart of their expansion. We make the basin a rallying point for every human still alive, no matter where they are. We turn it into the site of our greatest victory. This isn't just about reclaiming land, it's about sending a message: humanity is not broken, and we will not bow. Kieran nodded slowly. But we can't do this with just sabotage or guerrilla tactics. The Voltrex have already fortified that area. Their ships can patrol the skies in seconds, and their ground forces are overwhelming. How do you propose we pull this off? Maya's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dangerous crossing her expression. We use their own methods against them. We infiltrate their command centers, hijack their systems, and turn their surveillance against them. We don't need to fight them head-on, we need to outsmart them. The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of the plan sank in. They knew what was at stake. A failed mission meant certain death, but a successful one could change the course of the war. Amira, the team's resident hacker and tech expert, spoke up. The Voltrex use quantum encryption for their communications. It's almost impossible to break, but I think I can crack it. If we can hijack their data streams, we'll have access to their movements, their resource caches, their military positions. And what about their fleets? Kieran asked. Their ships are faster than ours, and their weapons are far beyond what we can handle with our makeshift tech. We don't need to defeat them with firepower, Maya replied. We need to disrupt them. Their fleets rely heavily on coordinated attacks. If we can sever their communication channels, if we can create confusion within their ranks, we'll have a chance to strike when they least expect it. Maya's plan was ambitious, to say the least. They would need to split into smaller teams, each with its own objective. One team would focus on infiltrating Voltrex communications and sabotaging their command structures. Another would work on disrupting the supply lines feeding the Voltrex's growing infrastructure. The third team would coordinate with the local human factions, gathering support and spreading the word of the coming offensive. The final team, Maya's own, would strike directly at the heart of the Voltrex's expansion site, the Amazon basin. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only one they had. And, despite the risks, there was a quiet sense of excitement in the air. For the first time in years, there was a plan that could tip the scales in their favor, a plan that could spark the revolution humanity so desperately needed. I know it sounds impossible, Maya said, her gaze sweeping over her team. But if we can pull this off, the Voltrex will be caught off guard. They'll be fractured, divided. And we'll have the momentum we need to take back control. There was a moment of pause, the weight of the situation pressing on everyone in the room. Then, one by one, her team members nodded in agreement. They had nothing left to lose. They had been fighting a losing war for too long. But this time, they would fight for something greater than survival. They would fight for freedom. As the days passed, the team worked tirelessly to prepare for the mission. Amira was locked in her lab, dissecting Voltrex encryption protocols and trying to find a backdoor into their systems. Kieran was organizing their ground forces, training the resistance fighters in the finer points of covert operations. Maya, meanwhile, spent every moment she could rallying the fractured human factions, convincing them to put aside their differences and unite under a single cause. The challenges were immense, and the stakes were higher than ever, but there was no turning back. On the eve of the operation, Maya stood alone in the room, her hand resting on the cold metal table. She stared at the map, her mind racing with possibilities, calculations, and contingencies. She knew that even the slightest mistake could ruin everything. But there was one thing she knew for certain: humanity's time of servitude had ended. It was time for them to take back what was rightfully theirs. And with that thought, she prepared to lead her team into the heart of the Voltrex empire, to strike a blow that would echo across the stars. The weeks that followed were a blur of frenetic activity. Maya's plan was ambitious, and it required the coordination of every fragment of resistance that remained. The days of scattered skirmishes were over. Now, they would move as one, a united front bent on reclaiming the basin, and in doing so, their last chance at a future. There were risks, unimaginable risks, but Maya wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, she felt the pulse of a real strategy. As her team worked tirelessly to prepare, Maya reached out to every contact she had, humans living in the outer colonies, in the alien-run districts, and even those who had long since lost hope. She broadcast messages across encrypted channels, urging them to join the cause. The basin is ours. The Voltrex will learn the true meaning of resistance. She didn't just call for support, she demanded action. The message spread quickly, from cell to cell, across fragmented human communities. The resistance had been fragmented for too long, but this time it would be different. The people could feel it. The first test came sooner than expected. A convoy of Voltrex supply ships was spotted heading toward the basin, likely carrying the final materials to build the new capital. The resistance knew this was their moment. Maya had already planned the first strike, a carefully timed ambush on the convoy that would delay their progress and disrupt their supply line. It wasn't just about hitting the Voltrex, it was about sending a message: humanity was no longer afraid. They were fighting back. The attack was swift, executed with precision. The convoy, unaware of the trap waiting for them, was torn apart by a barrage of human-made weapons, missiles rigged with alien tech scavenged from past battles. The Voltrex forces were stunned, disoriented, but they quickly regrouped, calling in reinforcements. The battle wasn't over yet. Maya knew the ambush wasn't going to win the war, but it was a critical first step. The convoy's destruction sent ripples throughout Voltrex command, and for the first time in years, the Voltrex were on the defensive. The fallout from the ambush was immediate. The Voltrex forces began tightening their security, reinforcing their perimeter around the basin. The humans in the region were hunted down, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the message: the Voltrex weren't invincible. Humans could hit back. The Voltrex underestimated the resilience of the people they had oppressed for so long, and now they were beginning to realize the depth of their mistake. As the days passed, Maya's coalition grew stronger. Other factions of the resistance rallied around her cause, and the attacks against Voltrex supply lines became more frequent. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and cyber attacks, each move chipped away at the alien empire's power. Maya knew they couldn't keep up this momentum forever. The Voltrex would retaliate in full force. But the longer they delayed their construction of the new capital, the more time humanity had to rally and unite. Then came the unexpected, a fracture within the Voltrex collective itself. It began with whispers, rumors about the internal politics of the alien empire. Some Voltrex factions were dissatisfied with their leadership, questioning the wisdom of their expansion into Earth's sacred land. The lower-ranking officers who had been stationed on Earth began to quietly defect, disillusioned by the arrogance of their superiors. Some humans caught wind of the shift, and Maya seized the opportunity to infiltrate Voltrex command through the disaffected factions. What had once been an unyielding monolith was beginning to crack. Maya's spy network provided critical intel about the Voltrex's weaknesses. She learned that the new capital was more than just a symbol of dominance, it was a symbol of the Voltrex leadership's fragile unity. The plan to build it was meant to solidify control, but in reality, it was a desperate gamble by the Voltrex to maintain their grasp on the galaxy. Maya realized that if they could disrupt the Voltrex leadership at the right moment, they could deal a blow that would not only halt the Basin project but potentially fracture the entire empire. The final stage of the plan involved a direct assault on the Voltrex's command center, located at the edge of the Basin. A high-risk mission, one that required precision and coordination on a scale that the Resistance had never attempted before. Maya's team worked tirelessly to prepare. They would need to infiltrate the heavily guarded complex, disable its communications, and plant a virus that would cripple the Voltrex's ability to coordinate their forces. At the same time, a second team would be on the ground, rallying the local human population to rise up against their alien captors. It was a multi-pronged attack, and it would all come down to timing. The night of the assault, Maya felt a calm resolve settle over her. The world around her had become a blur of constant tension, But this was different. The future of humanity, of Earth, rested on this moment. She had given everything to this cause, sacrificed everything she held dear. There was no turning back now. The assault was chaotic, as expected. The Voltrex were well prepared, and the resistance forces faced brutal opposition. But what the Voltrex couldn't account for was humanity's relentless determination. The virus worked, crippling the Voltrex's communication networks and sending their command center into disarray. The local population, emboldened by the Resistance's actions, erupted into revolt. Humans rose up from every corner of the basin, seizing weapons and fighting back with everything they had. In the end, the Voltrex were forced to retreat, their plans for the new capital in ruins. The basin, once a symbol of alien dominance, had become the birthplace of human resistance. It wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. The moment when humanity, long oppressed and broken, finally stood tall. Maya watched as the fires of rebellion burned in the distance, the cries of victory echoing across the land. The Voltrex had learned a harsh truth: no empire survives the moment when humanity decides enough is enough.